They thought I was the embarrassment of the family. At Christmas dinner, my parents mocked me louder than ever, calling me the shame who would never bring honor to their name. Everyone laughed, everyone except me. And then, in the middle of the insults, the front door opened, and the man no one expected walked in. What he revealed turned my parents' cruel words into the biggest regret of their lives. The Christmas dinner table was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of rich food. Lyra sat at the corner of the long table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, listening as her parents praised her siblings one by one. Her older brother was celebrated for his new promotion, her sister was admired for buying a house, and even her youngest cousin was praised for winning a school award. The room sparkled with joy, but each word felt like a knife pressed deeper into Lyra's heart. She stayed quiet, hoping the spotlight would pass over her, but her mother's eyes turned to her with a sharp smile. And then, her mother said loudly, "We have Lyra, our shame." The words fell heavy, and the room erupted in laughter. Some covered their mouths politely, others laughed openly, shaking their heads. Her father joined in, adding, "We don't even know what she does with her life. Always drifting, always disappointing." The laughter grew louder, bouncing against the walls, echoing in Lyra's ears. She forced a weak smile, trying to hide the sting, but inside her chest was burning. No one noticed how her fork trembled in her hand, or how her eyes turned glassy under the lights. At that moment, she wasn't their daughter or their sister. She was the joke that brought everyone together. Lyra kept her smile fixed on her face, even as the laughter around the table cut through her like a blade. She lowered her eyes, pretending to be unbothered, but inside she was breaking apart. Her chest felt heavy, and her throat ached as if the tears she refused to shed were pressing against her. She wanted to defend herself, to shout that she was not useless, but she knew her words would only bring more ridicule. So she swallowed her pain and kept silent. Behind her calm face, memories flooded her mind. Nights when she stayed awake until sunrise, working on endless reports, solving problems no one in her family even knew existed. Days when she skipped weddings, birthdays, and vacations, not because she didn't care, but because she was building something that mattered. Her parents never asked where she was or why she missed those gatherings. They simply assumed she was wasting her life. She remembered coming home tired and finding them gossiping about her, saying she was probably lost in failure. Every time she wanted to tell them about her struggles, about the pressure she carried on her shoulders, the words died in her mouth because she knew they wouldn't understand. Instead, she chose to carry it alone. She gave up so much, even simple moments of joy, because she wanted a future that no one else could see. And yet here she was, mocked for the very silence that kept her strong. As her family laughed louder, she clenched her hands under the table, her nails pressing into her skin to stop the tears from spilling. She kept smiling, but inside she was whispering to herself, "One day they will know. One day, this shame they laugh about will be the reason they sit in silence." Dulo sat across the table, his laughter fading quicker than the others. While everyone else enjoyed the cruel joke at Lyra's expense, his eyes lingered on her face. He saw the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the way her hand shook slightly as she lifted her glass. He had known Lyra since childhood, and he had always admired how quietly strong she was. She never complained, never fought back, but there was something in her that spoke of deep endurance. Tonight, though he could see the cracks, her eyes were glossy, not from joy, but from the pain she tried so hard to hide. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his chest tightening with guilt. Part of him wanted to speak up, to tell his aunt and uncle to stop, to remind them that Lyra deserved respect. But another part of him hesitated, unsure of what would happen if he did. He didn't know the full truth about Lyra's life, but he sensed she carried something big, something she never revealed to the family. He thought about the times he caught her leaving home before sunrise or returning late at night, tired yet focused, as if she was carrying the weight of a secret world on her shoulders. He always wanted to ask, but he never found the courage. Now, watching her suffer in silence, his heart ached. He wanted to stand for her, to be the voice she never had, but the room was filled with too many mocking eyes and judgmental smirks. So he stayed silent, his fork frozen above his plate. Still, his gaze never left her. In that moment, Dulo promised himself that whatever Lyra was hiding, he would be there to see it one day. He believed in her even when the others didn't. and though his silence stung him now, deep inside he knew the world would soon see what he had always seen. Lyra was not a shame. She was a storm waiting for her moment. While her family laughed and mocked her, none of them knew the truth about Lyra's life. To them, she was a young woman with no path, someone wasting her years while her siblings collected medals and praise. But behind closed doors, Lyra was someone completely different. Every morning before dawn, she sat in front of her laptop, preparing reports and strategies for one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. She wasn't just an employee. She was the lead strategist, the one her CEO trusted when the company faced its darkest hours. When investors pulled out and the business almost collapsed, it was Lyra's ideas that turned everything around. She spent sleepless nights studying market trends, drawing up plans, and guiding her team through crisis after crisis. It was her strategy that brought in new partners and saved thousands of jobs. People in the company looked at her with respect, whispering her name as the backbone of their survival. Yet none of this was known at home. Lyra never told her family because she knew they would never believe her, or worse, they would still compare her to her siblings. They judged her worth only by what they could see, never by what she quietly built. She carried her victories in silence, letting her work speak louder than her words. Even her salary, higher than anyone at the table could imagine, was kept private. She didn't buy flashy things or boast of her achievements. Instead, she invested, saved, and continued to grow. Every insult from her parents was a reminder of how blind they were, how they could not see the storm she carried within her. While they toasted others, she smiled and allowed them to think she was a failure. What they didn't know was that their shame had already become the very reason hundreds of families across the city could still put food on their tables. Her mother stood up from her chair, holding her glass high, her face glowing with pride as she looked around the long table. Everyone grew quiet, waiting for her words, because she always loved being the one to close a toast at family gatherings. She smiled at her son and daughter first, praising them again for their promotions and achievements, then glanced at the cousins who were celebrated earlier. The room was filled with nods and agreement, everyone eager to clap at her speech. Then her mother's eyes shifted toward Lyra, and a sharp edge entered her smile. "To our real stars," she said clearly, raising her voice so no one would miss a word. "May their success blind those who bring only shame." The words cut across the room like a knife, followed by bursts of laughter. Some clapped their hands at the remark, others covered their mouths as they laughed, but none of them looked at Lyra with kindness. Her father chuckled, adding, "That's the truth," while a cousin whispered loudly, "Some people were born to be nothing." Lyra kept her lips curled into the faintest smile, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Her hands tightened on her glass, her knuckles pale, but she refused to let it shake. She could feel her throat closing, the sting of tears threatening to rise, but she swallowed them down and kept her eyes steady. She let them laugh, let them enjoy the moment, because she knew the night was not over yet. Every cruel word only strengthened her silence. She remembered the late nights she spent at her desk, the contracts she fought to secure, the sleepless hours when she carried the pressure of an entire company on her shoulders. Those victories meant more to her than their shallow applause. Still, sitting there, listening to her own mother dismiss her existence in front of everyone, was a wound deeper than any she had ever felt. It was not strangers mocking her. It was the woman who gave her life. Yet, even as her heart bled quietly, she stayed still. She would not break, not here, not in front of them. Because in the corner of her mind, she already knew something they didn't. The night would not end the way they thought, and soon their laughter would fall silent. The table was still alive with laughter from her mother's cruel toast when a sudden sound interrupted the room. The sharp ring of the doorbell echoed through the house, making everyone pause mid-sentence. Knives and forks stopped moving, glasses hovered in the air, and confused looks were exchanged. No one was expecting visitors on Christmas night. Her father frowned, muttering about uninvited guests, while one of the cousins hurried to open the door. The laughter slowly faded into a thick silence as footsteps approached from the hallway. Then the door opened wider, and in walked a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, his presence commanding attention instantly. His confident stride, polished shoes, and calm authority made him look out of place in the warmth of a family gathering. He carried himself like someone who was used to being listened to, someone important. For a second, the family stared in stunned silence, whispering among themselves, trying to guess who he was. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, her chest tightening, because she knew him well. It was her CEO. The very man who trusted her with responsibilities no one else could handle. The man whose company she had helped pull back from collapse. He was the one person who knew her worth when her own family refused to see it. The cousins exchanged glances, whispering, "Who is he?" while her mother looked annoyed at the interruption. Her father straightened up, suddenly curious, as the stranger removed his coat and smiled warmly. But what shocked them most was when his eyes fell directly on Lyra. His face lit up with recognition, and without hesitation he walked past everyone else and went straight to her. "Lyra," he said with genuine relief, as though finding her here was the best part of his evening. "I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to thank you in person for everything you've done. I hope I'm not interrupting." The room went completely still. The same relatives who just laughed at her now stared with wide eyes, trying to piece together what was happening. No one understood why a man of his stature would step into their home on Christmas, just to see the one person they called shame. But for the first time that night, Lyra did not feel small. She felt the shift in the air, the beginning of a truth that could no longer be hidden. All eyes followed the tall man as he walked straight to Lyra, ignoring the puzzled looks from everyone else. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice warm and full of pride. "Lyra, I can't tell you how grateful I am to you," he said clearly, making sure his words carried through the room. "You saved us. That deal you closed last week didn't just secure the future of our company, it saved thousands of jobs. Without your strategy, without your persistence, we would not be standing today." Gasps filled the table. The family members who had laughed at her minutes ago froze with their mouths half open, unsure if they heard correctly. Her father blinked in disbelief. Her mother's glass slipped slightly in her hand, and the cousins exchanged stunned glances. No one moved. The CEO continued, his voice steady and certain. "Most people don't realize how close we came to collapse. Even I, at one point, doubted if we could survive. But this young woman sitting here refused to give up. She worked night after night, sacrificing her own comfort, and she brought us back from the edge. Today, because of her, my job still exists. Our company still stands. Thousands of families will have food on their tables this Christmas, all because of her." His words landed heavily, filling every corner of the dining room. The same space that moments ago echoed with laughter at her expense now felt suffocating in silence. Everyone's eyes turned to Lyra, but she did not shrink back this time. She sat straighter, her calm smile hiding the storm of emotions in her chest. Her mother looked pale, her lips pressed tightly together, unable to speak. Her father shifted uncomfortably, his proud posture collapsing. The cousins who mocked her avoided her eyes, suddenly ashamed. And Dulo, sitting quietly at the corner, felt his chest swell with both pride and relief. He had always known she was more than they gave her credit for, but even he had not realized how great her impact truly was. The CEO placed a hand gently on Lyra's shoulder, looking around the room once more. "If this is what shame looks like, then I hope the world gives me more of it," he said with a small, confident smile. The silence that followed was louder than any insult ever thrown at her. For the first time, it was not Lyra who felt small. It was everyone else who had tried to diminish her worth. The room felt heavier than it had moments before, as if the air itself had been stolen away. Plates of untouched food sat forgotten. Glasses remained halfway lifted, and every single pair of eyes turned toward Lyra. Just minutes ago, those same eyes had glowed with amusement, mocking her, laughing at her expense. Now they stared wide and unblinking, their faces frozen between shock and shame. The same cousins who whispered insults under their breath sat stiff, their laughter caught in their throats, unable to meet her gaze. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their pride melting into silence. Her parents, who had led the cruel chorus, looked the most broken of them all. Her mother's hand still held her glass in the air, but it trembled so badly that drops of wine threatened to spill. Her lips were parted, yet no words came out. It was as though her sharp tongue, the one that had so easily cut into Lyra moments earlier, had been stolen. Her father sat back in his chair, his face drained of color. His confident smirk was gone, replaced by a stunned expression that revealed his regret more than any apology ever could. For the first time, they both seemed small, exposed in front of the very family they tried to impress by mocking their daughter. No one dared to break the silence. The weight of the CEO's words still lingered in the room, echoing louder than any toast or insult ever had. They all realized the truth at the same time, that the one they had labeled shame was the reason an entire company and thousands of families had been saved. She wasn't the failure they painted her to be. She was the quiet force who had built success where others would have collapsed. Dulo watched the scene unfold, his chest swelling with pride, his eyes soft with relief. He wanted to speak up, to say, "I always knew she was more than what you called her." But even he knew words weren't needed now. The silence itself was a judgment, louder than any defense. Lyra sat calmly, her face serene, though inside her heart pounded. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't rise to prove her worth. She simply existed in that silence, finally seen for who she truly was. And as her parents lowered their eyes, pale and speechless, they understood the cruelest truth. They had spent years belittling the very reason for her success. Lyra sat in the middle of the heavy silence, every eye still locked on her, waiting for what she would say. She could feel the weight of their shame, the sting of their regret, pressing down like an invisible blanket over the table. For the first time, she had the power to strike back, to throw their cruelty in their faces. But that wasn't who she was. She didn't need to humiliate them to feel strong. She already had her victory. Slowly, she lifted her glass, her hand steady and calm, and her voice rose softly but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Shame built me into someone stronger," she said, her eyes scanning the faces that once mocked her. "I'm grateful you pushed me hard enough to prove myself without you." Her words were not loud, yet they carried more weight than any insult ever spoken at that table. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their eyes, unable to face her. Her parents froze, the sting of her words piercing them deeper than any outburst ever could. There was no anger in her tone, only truth, and that truth left them powerless. Dulo watched her with admiration, his chest swelling with quiet pride. He knew Lyra could have crushed them in that moment, exposed all the pain they had caused her. Instead, she chose grace, showing that her strength came not from revenge, but from resilience. She had already won, and her calmness proved it. Her glass shimmered under the light as she held it a little higher. "You thought shame would break me," she continued softly, her voice steady and even. "But it shaped me. And today I no longer carry it as a burden. I wear it as proof that I can rise, even when no one believed I could." The silence in the room deepened, pressing on everyone like a confession. Her words forced them to see her not as the quiet failure they once mocked, but as the strong, unshakable woman sitting before them. Lyra lowered her glass slowly, her face calm, her heart steady. She didn't smile in triumph, nor did she demand applause. She didn't need it. Her triumph was in the fact that they finally knew the truth. She was never their shame. She was their lesson. And that was enough. The CEO let his hand rest lightly on the back of Lyra's chair as he turned his gaze toward her parents. His expression was calm but firm, the kind of look that carried authority without needing to be raised. He glanced at them for a moment, then spoke clearly so that every single person at the table could hear. "If this is shame," he said, his words steady and deliberate, "then I wish the world had more of it." The sentence hung in the air like a verdict. For a split second, the room remained frozen, but then the sound of hands clapping broke through the silence. It started with Dulo, his face glowing with pride, and quickly spread across the table. One by one, relatives joined in, until the whole room was filled with applause. The same people who had laughed at her earlier were now cheering, their faces red with embarrassment, yet unable to resist the power of truth. Lyra's parents sat stiff in their chairs, their eyes lowered, their pale faces betraying the weight of regret that pressed heavily on them. Their mocking words, their cruel laughter, every insult they had thrown at her now echoed back in their own ears, stripped of power and full of shame. They had wanted to present her as a failure, but instead, the world had seen her as a triumph. Lyra sat quietly, her heart calm, her face soft but strong. She didn't rise, didn't gloat, didn't demand acknowledgement. She didn't need to. For the first time in her life, the respect that had always been denied to her filled the room naturally. The applause wasn't just for her achievement. It was for her dignity, her resilience, her quiet strength that spoke louder than all the cruel words combined. Her CEO smiled down at her, then gave a small nod. as if confirming to everyone in the room what he already knew. Lyra was not their shame. She was their pride, their lesson. Their proof that greatness doesn't always shout but often waits quietly until the right moment to shine. Her parents remained silent, trapped in the humiliation they had built for themselves. And Lyra, sitting exactly where she had once been mocked, finally glowed, not because she sought their approval, but because she no longer needed it. In the very place she was humiliated, she rose higher than them all.